Welcome to our ongoing Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the 7 Universal Noachite Commandments class. Today, with the help of God, of course, we will be studying a chapter in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Jewish Code of Law, which this chapter really pertains to non-Jews, or to the relationship between a Jew and a non-Jew when it comes to Shabbos, to the Holy Sabbath. And it has to do, as we will see, with avadim. An eved, or an eved canaani to be specific, is a non-Jew that is owned as a slave by a Jew. It's questionable as to why these laws are even, or how they even find their way into the Shulchan Aruch. For the Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish Code of Law, which was written roughly some 500 years ago by Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, and then followed by the glosses, the notations of the Ramah, Reb Moshe Isserlis, shortly thereafter, is written primarily for the Jew living in the time of exile, in the diaspora, or even in the land of Israel, but as it is in the time of exile. And there are 4 sections to the Shulchan Aruch, to the Jewish Code of Law, and they all basically deal with laws which are relevant and pertinent when we don't have the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and when we don't have all of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel, when it's time of exile. As opposed to, for example, the Rambam, Maimonides, where he is very unique, and he brings down all the Jewish laws of the entire Torah, all 613 commandments, in all their details, all the laws in his 14 books. So the question is, since nowadays there really is no such thing as an Eved canaani, as a slave that's owned by a Jew, so why then do we even have this chapter in the Shulchan Aruch? And there's even a notation in the printed Shulchan Aruch, and likewise in the Tur, which is that which preceded the Shulchan Aruch, that the Shulchan Aruch is based on. So the Beis Yosef, which is the author of the Shulchan Aruch, in his elaborate commentary on the Tur, which he wrote prior to writing the Shulchan Aruch, he actually gives a little bit of an introduction and says, since these laws are not relevant nowadays, he will not elaborate. But be that as it may, we're now going to be studying in the Shulchan Aruch, in the first section called Orach Chaim, in the laws of Shabbos, and this would be Siman Dalit Shin, chapter 304. It's not very long, relatively speaking, and therefore what I would like to do is to actually learn the entire chapter, the whole siman, inside. It contains 3 seifim, 3 subsections. And then we have the main commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, which one of the main ones is the Magen Avraham. And then that's going to bring us to, later on, get to the Mishnah Berurah, which was written 1 generation ago by the Orach Chaim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kogan, who pretty much condenses and brings down different opinions based on the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, such as the Magen Avraham and others. So let us begin. The heading, the title of this chapter is Al Eize Eved Mitzuve Al Shvisasoy. With regards to which slave is the Jew commanded to make sure that his slave refrains from doing any work on Shabbos, that he rests and does not do melacha, forbidden labor on Shabbos. Adam mitzuve al shvisas avdoi, shemol v'toval l'shem avdus, v'kibel olav mitzvahs hanoyages be'eved. A man, in this case referring to the Jew, a Jew is commanded to see to it that his slave rest, refrain from doing forbidden labor on the Shabbos. Which Eved are we talking about? That he was circumcised and he immersed himself in the ritualarium, in the mikvah, for the sake of becoming an Eved. And he accepted upon himself those commandments which apply to the Eved, which basically are all the commandments that apply to a Jewish woman. As we've discussed in previous classes, Jewish women are exempt from certain types of commandments. Basically, all negative commandments, all prohibitions apply to Jewish women. And as far as the positive commandments, so they're exempt, as a rule, from any positive commandment that is time-bound. And the same would apply to an Eved canaani, a non-Jewish slave owned by a Jew. If he's a proper, full-fledged Eved, which again means that he was circumcised, not to be a Jew, but to be an Eved, he immersed in the mikvah, again, similar to the concept of conversion, but not to convert to be a Jew, rather to be an Eved, and he accepted upon himself all the mitzvahs, all the commandments that an Eved needs to keep. Such a person, his Jewish owner, his master, is obligated, is commanded to make sure that his Eved does not desecrate the Shabbos. Aval, however, im lo yimol v'toval, ela kibel alav sheva mitzvahs b'nei noyach. But how about if this quote-unquote Eved, which is property of the Jew, if this individual did not have himself circumcised, did not immerse in the mikvah, but rather he accepted upon himself to keep the 7 Noachite laws. He formally, officially accepted to keep all of those 7 laws that all of mankind are supposed to keep. Harei hu kiger teshav. Behold, he is akin to, he is like a ger toshav. And we've discussed at length in previous classes what ger toshav is. And as a reminder, a ger toshav is basically a non-Jew who accepts upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei noyach, and he therefore lives in the land of Israel, and he has certain rights, and the Jewish community in Israel is to not only respect him, but to actually support him financially and otherwise. And he's even allowed, to a certain degree, to live and to actually even own some real estate in the land of Israel, although generally the Jews are not permitted to allow any non-Jews to own land in Israel. And this person is treated differently than a regular non-Jew. And as the Rambam tells us in a number of places, that a ger toshav can only be accepted, the concept only exists when we have the Jubilee year in effect. Which means it's not even enough that we have the Beis HaMikdash, but we need to have all the Jews living in the land of Israel, and the 50th year, the Jubilee year, the Yovel, has to be in effect. Only then can we have a ger toshav. So therefore, the author of the Shulchan Aruch is telling us that an Eved that is owned by a Jew that did not have the bris milah, circumcision, and did not toivel, immerse in the mikvah, and did not accept upon himself all the mitzvahs of an Eved, but rather he accepted upon himself to keep the 7. That person is like a ger toshav, umutar la'asais melacha b'Shabbos la'atzmoi, and that individual is permitted to do melacha, forbidden Shabbos labor, for himself. Avoloi l'raboy, but even that person who's not a full-fledged Eved, he is not permitted to do melacha for his Jewish master on Shabbos. And all Jews, not just his master, all Jews are forbidden to instruct him or to request of him to do any melacha, forbidden labor, for any Jew on Shabbos. So again, for himself, no restrictions. For his master, he may not do any melacha, and not only that, but no Jew is permitted to request of him to do any melacha for any Jew. Afilu Misha'enai rabbi, even if the person that you want him to do malacha for them is not his master, not his owner. V'im lo kibel olav shum mitzvah, el adayin hu akum gamur. How about, let's take it a step further, a third type of an eved, so to say. He did not even accept upon himself the 7. He accepted upon himself no mitzvah, no commandment. So then he is like a complete non-Jew. And again, to remind you what we've mentioned many times in the past, due to the censorship, so many of the texts have been tampered with, unfortunately. Going back to the Talmud and throughout the commentaries and so many of the Jewish texts and rabbinic textbooks, they've tampered, and instead of saying non-Jew in one form or another, they use the term akum, which is an acronym for those that worship stars and constellations. But that's not what it means, and it's not that narrow and that limited, but rather it generally means any regular non-Jew. So then it depends on which text you're looking in, but many times it'll be changed. Instead of saying akum, it may say eino Yehudi, which means a non-Jew. It may say nochri or goy. So here too, although the printed version that I'm using says akum, others may say differently. And it's probably more accurate to say something like nochri or goy or eino Yehudi. So the person who is owned by a Jew, and he did not accept upon himself even to keep the 7 Noachite commandments, so then he is still like an absolute non-Jew. Dinoi shave lekibel olav sheva mitzvahs. He is just like the previous category. He's the same as the Eved, which accepted upon himself to keep the 7, which we said that person is like a ger toshav. So category number 3, says the Shulchan Aruch, is identical to category number 2. Meaning even if the individual did not accept upon himself to keep the 7. So it's a regular goy, a regular non-Jew, who is owned by a Jew. He may do melacha for himself. He may not do melacha for any Jew. Certainly not for his master, and not even for any other Jew. So based on this ruling, so the needs of a Jew that is ill or is in discomfort, that it's not life-threatening, all right? We have basically 2 categories when it comes to illness on Shabbos. We have someone whose life is in danger, even if it may be remotely so, but if it's concern of his life. And then we have a different category, someone who is ill, but it's not at all life-threatening. The Kaim Malan, that we have established, we have the Jewish law, the principle is, Oimer la'akum v'oiseh. When it comes to a Jew on Shabbos that is ill but not life-threatening, it is permissible for any Jew to instruct the non-Jew to do malacha for that person. Right? So, to put it in practical terms, I mean, there's countless examples. But let's say there's a Jew that is ill, and the medic, or the doctor, or the nurse, whoever, the EMT, whoever is assessing the situation, says this person is not at all in a life-threatening situation. However, if you would drive them to the hospital, they would be able to treat this person and make him comfortable. Or you would need to, this person, if you cook some food for them, a particular type of a dish, that would make them feel better. Being that it's not life-threatening, a Jew may not do any of the above. A Jew cannot drive that person. A Jew cannot cook for that person. However, a Jew may instruct or request, or if he owns the Eved, he may command that the non-Jew should do it for him. And likewise, if there is a deceased Jew, the body of a deceased Jew, on the first day of a Jewish festival, which means that it's a biblical day. The Kaim Malon, that again, we have established Jewish law, the principle is, Yisasku boy hamamin, that nations, meaning non-Jews, should be involved in whatever needs to be done to bury this person. So according to the actual law, the letter of the law, if there is a Jew who passed away on the first day of any of the Jewish holidays, so the rule is that we are permitted to have non-Jews do whatever needs to be done. They can dig the grave, they can bury this Jew. So too, in this case, Asur loymar le'eved Yisrael, it is forbidden then in these two cases, these two examples, of a Jew who is ill in a non-life-threatening situation, or for the deceased Jew on the first day of the Jewish festival, it would be forbidden to tell this type of an Eved, Afilu hu oived avodah zarah, even if he is an idolater. And again, there's probably a few versions to this. Oived elilim, it's an acronym, which means one who worships idols. Or Oived Avodas Gilulim. Basically, even if he's an idolater, so not only did he not accept upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs, he's actually transgressing, in a sense, the worst of all of them, and he is actually an idolater. But because he's owned by a Jew, you're not allowed, the Jew may not tell him to do melacha. The kevan de meleches eved asur min haTorah, since for an Eved, again, that means a non-Jew who's owned by a Jew. Since for an Eved to do melacha, to do forbidden labor on Shabbos, is a biblical prohibition, because the verse says so clearly that when it warns the Jewish people about not doing melacha, so it says your son, your daughter, and your Eved is in that list. Therefore, it's not permissible unless it's a life-threatening situation for a Jew. So, to bury the Jew, which normally would be permitted to tell a non-Jew, this is unfortunately not a life-threatening situation anymore, because the guy's dead. And for the ill Jew, who is not in a life-threatening situation, again, it's not life-threatening. So, similar to the fact that a Jew can't do a malacha for that person, neither can the Eved, who is owned by a Jew. So when we say that you could tell a non-Jew to do it, it's only in those cases where it's a regular non-Jew, not one who is in the category of an Eved, of a Jew. And to be an Eved, he need not be a full-fledged Eved who had circumcision and mikvah and accepting all the commandments of an Eved. But even if he only accepted the Shav Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach, and even if he didn't accept the Shav Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach, and he's even an idolater, but because he's an Eved owned by a Jew, he may not do melacha for any Jew. And then the Shulchan Aruch continues. V'yesh choilkim, and there are those that disagree. Umatirim bazeh, and they in fact allow in such a situation, that in the latter situation of this Eved, you would be allowed to instruct him to do malacha. Umi kol makim, but nonetheless, im haya oisem meleches rabbi, what about if this Eved is doing melacha for his master, shaloi midaitoi, without his master's consent or knowledge? V'nikar, and it's clearly recognizable, that he's not doing it with the encouragement or with the consent of his master. You, looking at him, you can tell that he does not have the consent of his master to do this work for his master. Mutar, that would be permissible. So even though we said his master is commanded to see to it that he rests and that he refrain from doing malacha, nonetheless, if he's doing it without his master's consent, and it's quite obvious to the onlooker that that's the case, that it's permitted. And then in that case, his master need not stop him. And then it adds over here, which apparently this is an addition from the Ramah, the glosses on the Shulchan Aruch as mentioned. So the Ramah adds in, even if he accepted upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei noyach. Meaning we're going back and forth, whether it's leniency or stringency, it's the same thing. The fellow who did not accept anything and the one who accepted to keep the 7 mitzvahs are pretty much in the same category. Ul Yisrael acher. What about another Jew, she'einoi rabbi, that's not his master, not his owner, but another bystanding Jew? Afilu oisel adas Yisrael mutar. Then, even if this Eved is doing it with the knowledge and the consent of a Jew, just not his master, mutar, it will be permissible. Kol she'ein sham amiras Yisrael. So long as there's no direct instruction of a Jew telling him to do it. So again, you have this Eved that is owned by a Jew. And either he only accepted the 7 mitzvahs or not even that. He is not permitted to do melacha for his master or for any Jew. However, for himself, certainly he may. And he may be instructed to do melacha. Well, sorry, not instructed. He may do melacha for other Jews, and even for his master, as long as it's clear that it's without his master's consent. But for the other Jew that's not his master, it can be with the Jew's consent, so long as the Jew did not directly instruct him to do it. But then there's another condition. So long as the Jew does not derive benefit from that melacha on Shabbos. And then there are those that say, this is another opinion, that they make a clear distinction between the Eved number 2 and 3, and as opposed to the opinion that we just dealt with until now, opinion number 2 and 3 are the same. Eved number 2 and 3 are the same. Namely, whether you accepted the Sheva mitzvahs or whether you accepted nothing, it's all the same. This opinion says no, there's a distinction. And they say that as long as he did not accept upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs, Kevan, the akum gamurhu, since he's an absolute goy, he's a complete goy, Ein Rabbi Muzar Olav. His master is not commanded at all, even though technically he's an Eved. He's owned by a Jew. But when the Torah specifies, when the verse says that you mustn't do melacha, you nor your son nor your daughter nor your Eved, it is not talking about this Eved. And according to this, so the needs for a Jew who is ill in a non-life-threatening situation, and likewise the needs of a Jewish deceased on the first day of the Jewish festival, it is permissible to outright instruct them and tell them to do it, to tell this Eved to do it. He's no different than any other guy that's independent and not owned by any Jew and not an Eved. All right, we're going to skip the Ramah, and we're going to go on to Beis, the second seif, the second law in this chapter. Vehecha, and where the mutar ha'eved lasis malacha latzmai, in the case where the Eved is permissible to do malacha for himself, namely category 2 and 3, either way, according to both opinions, meaning as long as he didn't accept upon him, as long as he wasn't circumcised and immersed in the mikvah and accepted upon himself all the mitzvahs of an Eved, so long as he falls short of that, where we said he's allowed to do melacha for himself, Im Omar le ha'adoin. If his master said to him, the Jewish owner, sheyaseh la'atzmoi, that he should do work for himself. V'yozun atzmoi b'yom Shabbos, and therefore let him sustain himself on Shabbos. Now, the master wants to save money. So he says, you know what, go work and go take care of yourself. So you can go to the field, and he tells him, go harvest the food that you need, whatever you need to do. Since his Jewish master made this condition with him before the Shabbos began, it was during the week, it was not yet Shabbos when he told him, then indeed this Eved is permitted to do these forbidden activities on Shabbos for his own sustenance. Will be levad, but provided that it's betzina, it's done in private. That it should not be any way that there can be a concern that people may look, because we're concerned with the onlookers, because people don't know all of the stipulations and all of the conditions that were made. So people see, this man I know is an Eved belonging to this and this Jew. And right now I see that he is working. That does not look right. They don't know that he's only working for his own food, and so therefore the condition is it's got to be in a way that it should not be visible to the onlooker. Finally, Gimel, number 3. And this is really going to be the one that we're going to focus on, but I just feel that it was important to learn the entire chapter up to this point. Now Gimel. And again, here comes different versions, censorship. Akum gamur, or Eino Yehudi gamur, basically an absolute non-Jew. We're no longer talking about the fellow who is in the category of an Eved. He's a non-Jew, regular non-Jew. He's not owned by anybody. He's an independent human being that is not Jewish. Shu sakir. However, he is an employee, a hired worker of a Jew. He's not an Eved, but he works for a Jew. Ein rabbi mitzuv al shvisosei. So his master, his employer, is not commanded for him to keep Shabbos in any way, shape, or form. His Jewish employer need not refrain or hold him back or see to it that he does not do malacha. Because the man's not Jewish, and even though he is an employee of a Jew, does not matter. So whatever laws apply between a Jew and a non-Jew on Shabbos apply to this person, even though he is a sakir, a hired worker of a Jew. So if a Jew is allowed to tell a non-Jew to do malacha for someone who is non-life-threatening ill, so in this case as well, if a Jew is allowed to instruct him to bury a Jew on the first day of the Jewish festival, he's allowed to tell him to do that as well. And he certainly could do malacha for himself, and whatever applies to a non-Jew applies to him. Now on that, let us see the commentary of the Magen Avraham. Now, we're going to begin, for those that would look inside or can follow inside, in the standard printed of the Shulchan Aruch. It's on the left-hand side. And the notation, which we call Seif Katan, would be in between 11 and 12. It's sort of an independent piece. The line begins with the word bizmanenu. So it's pretty much right in the middle of the Magen Avraham. Bizmanenu. Nowadays, says the Magen Avraham, which again, this was written some 300, 400 years ago. Nowadays, shehamelech gozar, that the king had made a decree. Shelo yikne Yehudi eved, that a Jew shall not acquire a slave. There's such a law. Magen Avraham is speaking in his days where there's a law that the king said that a Jew can't buy a non-Jew as a slave. Im kain, so if so, so then the people that are avadim, they are permitted to do malacha, the heve kesachir, because now his legal status would be like a sakir, what we just learned about in the third seif. He's a hired worker. He's no more than an employee of a Jew, even though the Jew may have paid money for him and he may be his eved. But since the law of the land, by decree of the king, is that a Jew may not acquire an eved, he's like a sakir. And that means that practically speaking, all the rules of sakir would apply, meaning a regular goy. And then in the parentheses it brings down the opinions that say that, the references. However, there are those that disagree, those that argue. And they hold that now as well, gufan kanui, their body is owned by the Jew. The achshav shapirim kerega badu avodim afilu larashtam gufan kanui afilu lekula. So even according to the opinion that was brought down beforehand, that he's not considered like an eved, but even that opinion would agree that they are, because their body is owned by a Jew. All right. And now let's go on to number 12, which is the commentary, the Magen Avraham, on the one that we just did now, that we said that a non-Jew who is a sakir, a hired worker of a Jew, is just like a regular non-Jew, and he's not like an eved. Akum gamur, an absolute non-Jew. Perush, this means even if he's doing the work, the forbidden Shabbos labor for his master, ein asur midiraisa. Biblically, it's not forbidden. Because again, the Torah only forbids the eved. However, a regular non-Jew, biblically, there's no problem with having him do malacha. And biblically, a Jew would be permitted to tell the non-Jew outright and directly, instruct him, do this for me. It's only that, in most cases, it's rabbinically forbidden. But biblically, it's permitted. And therefore, this same fellow, this sakir who's doing the work of and for and on behalf of his Jewish master, biblically is permitted. Because he is not acquired and owned by his Jewish master forever, for eternity, unlike the Eved. Vayin reish siman zeh, v'im kibel olav mitzvos hanohoigos be'eved, now the Magen Avraham introduces another thing. Based on what we just learned in the Shulchan Aruch, he is now going to address a case which wasn't directly addressed. What happens if this sakir, this hired worker, he's merely an employee, what happens if he accepted upon himself to keep all the laws of an Eved? He's not an Eved, but he took upon himself to keep all the Eved Canaani rules, which basically means all the mitzvahs that Jewish women have to keep. But he's a sakir. Nire li, says the Magen Avraham, it seems to me, the ein rabbi mitzvah shvisasoi kishoyis elatzmoi, that his master, his Jewish employer, is not commanded to see to it that he does not do malach on Shabbos if he's doing things for himself. For the Torah has not warned, it did not give the prohibition of doing malacha, ella al eved hakanui kinyan olam, only an eved which belongs to the Jew forever. So even though this person is like an eved, but he's not owned by the Jew forever. Aval eved also lasis malacha afilu la'atzmoi. And therefore, a real Eved, a full-fledged Eved, cannot do malacha even for himself, like we said earlier. That his master is obligated to see to it that he does not break the Shabbos, even for himself, in the privacy of his own room. Because that the verse says that you have to see to keep Shabbos, you and your son, your daughter, and your Eved. Da kibel olav mitzvahs anhayagas be'isha. Because an Eved accepted upon himself to keep mitzvahs that apply to the Jewish woman. And of course, the Jewish woman has to keep the Shabbos. Umashma behar Rambam, and then he says it's implied clearly in the Rambam. Shein mekablin eved v'ger toshav bizman hazeh ein sham soif perek chaf beis. From the Rambam it comes out, it's implied, it's pretty clear, that we do not accept an eved nor a ger toshav nowadays, as he is referencing chapter 22 in the laws of Isurei Bia, of forbidden relations, where that's one of the places where the Rambam says that we are not mekabel, we don't accept ger toshav unless it's the time of the yovel. So likewise, eved also. There's no such thing as an eved canaani nowadays. When we don't have the yovel, we don't have ger toshav, likewise, we don't have eved. So the only situation we can really have today is a sakir, someone who's hired by a non-Jew, and at most, we can have someone who is, to use the language that the Shulchan Aruch used, ki ger toshav, but you can't really have more than that. And then he concludes with another point. V'kosav beis Yosef, b'shem Mahari, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, in his commentary, the Beis Yosef on the Tur, he wrote in the name of a sage prior to him, those maidservants, those non-Jewish women that are maidservants in a Jewish home, even though they are acquired forever, for their whole life, they're bought by the Jew, and the Jew owns them, they work for the Jew, these live-in maids, for the rest of their lives. However, since it's their choice, and if they choose to become Muslim, to accept the Islamic religion, they would then go out free from this Jewish home. Shemadin and sakir akum. So he says perhaps they have the status of this person that we're talking about here, the non-Jewish sakir, which means they're not at all like an eved. And he concludes by saying v'tzarich iyun, but this needs further investigation. He's not being clear. He's not ruling clearly. He's just saying perhaps that's the situation, and we still need to go further and analyze it. And he leaves it with that. All right, now that was the Magen Avraham, his commentary on this last, the third law in the Shulchan Aruch. Putting that aside, now we're going to take a look in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah, as mentioned, was written by a great rabbi who is known by another one of the books that he authored called the Orach Chaim, neither of which are his name. Mishnah Berurah is the name of this book, his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, and Orach Chaim is the name of the book that he wrote on the laws of slander and gossip and forbidden speech and all that, where he wrote many laws, and also he wrote the Musar, with regards to all that. His name was, as mentioned, Reb Yisrael Meir HaKoyen Kagan. And he lived in the beginning of the, well, it's already, I was going to say the previous century, but he passed away in the 1930s. I believe so. Now, he wrote commentary Mishnah Berurah on the first section of the Shulchan Aruch, the first of the 4 sections. And aside for the Mishnah Berurah, he wrote a more detailed commentary called the Biur Halacha. So, let's first see the Mishnah Berurah, which is pretty much a recap of the Magen Avraham and others, and then we need to take a close look at his very interesting Biur Halacha. So it's the same setup as the Shulchan Aruch. We're in chapter 304 in the laws of Shabbos, and on the third Seif, Gimel, where it says, Eino Yehudi Gamur, an absolute non-Jew, who is a sakir of a Jew. So the Shulchan Aruch ruled that he is considered just like a regular non-Jew. He's not at all an Eved. So, on that law, says the Mishnah Berurah. This is in Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan, notation Chaftala, 24. However, if this sakir, this employee, accepted upon himself to keep the 7 Noachide commandments, haloyu ger toshav, well then he's the ger toshav. V'asur lasis malacha liYisrael, and then he's not allowed to do any malacha for a Jew. Af l'mishenei rabbi, even for a Jew who's not his master. The canaani, as mentioned above, that he spoke about earlier. And take a look in the Rambam, chapter 14, of the laws of Isurei Biyah. That we do not, the Jewish community, the Jewish court does not accept the ger toshav when it's not a time of the Jubilee. And likewise, same idea would be an Eved that does not want to accept upon himself the Eved mitzvahs. Ki im zayin, he just wants to accept upon himself the 7 Noachide commandments. Kamoi ger toshav, just like a ger toshav. Gam kin en mekabli noisa bizman she'ena yevul noyeg. So too, we don't accept such a person when there's no Jubilee year. So there's no such thing as an Eved who's only accepting the 7 mitzvahs. However, the Ravid, which is the main critic of the Rambam, he disagrees with this ruling of the Rambam, and he tells us we could take a look there in Isurei Biyah for further reference. Next, Chafei 25, Shehu Sakir. So this absolute guy that is a hired worker, even if he's a hired worker for years, not just for a week or so, even if he was hired to work for this Jew for years, but he's only an employee. I don't care how many years it is. He's not property of the Jew forever. And therefore, he does not have to refrain from doing malacha. And even if he would be doing malacha for his master, the Jewish master, for his employer, no problem biblically. Because he's not in the category, he's not included of being his eved, his slave. And therefore, whatever malacha is permissible for a non-Jew to do for the Jew, this fellow is exactly the same, and he can do them as well. V'kasa beis Yosef, shem mahari nistapik boisen avodim v'ashvachos oiv de gilulim, shem rotzu lahamir dasam v'likonis l'dasi shmoel yotzim l'cheirus. And then he brings down the Magen Avraham that we just saw, that the beis Yosef brings down that there's a doubt, there's a question. What about the Eved and the Shivcha? I mean, actually, the Magen Avraham, the way he quoted the beis Yosef, it's just that Shivcha, the maidservant. But the way the Mishnah Berurah is quoting that beis Yosef, he says Eved and Shivcha, that the male slave or female maidservant. What about those that have the choice, and if they choose to convert or to embrace the Islamic religion, they automatically go free from their Jewish owner. Efsher, then it's possible that although currently they are owned for eternity or for the rest of their lives by the Jew, but since they have a way to get out of that by simply accepting the Islamic religion, maybe because they have the option of freeing themselves by embracing and converting to the other religion, so perhaps that gives them the status of a regular sakir, which is like a regular absolute non-Jew. And then, of course, as the Magen Avraham concluded, that this requires further analysis. And now, on that point, the Mishnah Berurah adds. That's where the Magen Avraham ended. The Mishnah Berurah now adds to that. And the opinion of the later halachic rulers, the codifiers, after the Magen Avraham, lahachmir bazeh, to be stringent, to be strict in this case. And the reason for that is because there is a concern of a biblical prohibition here. The general rule is that when it comes to a biblical prohibition, if we have a doubt, we have to be strict. And since here we're talking about these individuals, this shifcha, this maidservant, who may be considered an eved, a shifcha, and therefore biblically forbidden to do malacha, and perhaps she is not anything more than a regular non-Jew, and she would be permitted. Since it's not clear, and since there's no conclusion, therefore, the achroinim, the later codifiers, say we have to be strict and consider her to be like an eved. And certainly, adds the Mishnah Berurah, if you're living in a situation where the person doesn't have the option to convert or denounce their adherence to us Jews and to become some other religion, in that case, certainly this shifcha would not be allowed to do malacha for the Jew. Yeah. See the other commentary, the other main commentary, which is the Taz. So this is what the Mishnah Berurah is bringing down from the Taz. The Taz brings down the same Beis Yosef that the Magen Avraham brings down. And then he continues, and therefore, anyone who's a Baal Nefesh, anyone who's on a very high level and wants to be extremely scrupulous in doing the right thing, needs to be careful from these people that we are not sure whether they have a status of an Eved or a regular non-Jew, and therefore don't allow them to do malacha. And surely, certainly, if it's in a place that they don't have permission to embrace a different religion and thus freeing themselves, then it's without a doubt that it's an absolute prohibition for them to do malacha for a Jew on Shabbos. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah is bringing down from that Taz. All right. Next. Chavav. The last Mishnah Berurah on this chapter, 26. So we said that an absolute non-Jew, that is a sakir, a hired worker of a Jew, his master, the Jew, is not obligated to hold him back from doing any melacha. Ein rabbi mitzvah. His master is not commanded. The makim shamelech yorum hadaroi, may his kingship be exalted. It's an expression showing respect to the king of the time. So in a place where the king, Gazar, decreed, Shein shum adam chutz midasam yichol niknes eved ve'ama. What happens if you're living in a time, which this was the first piece of the Magen Avraham that we saw, the king made a decree that anyone other than their religion is not allowed to acquire any slave. You cannot buy any person. If you're not part of the religion, whatever it is, Christian, whatever case we're talking about, for example, a Jew would not be allowed to buy anybody. It's against the law because you're not part of their religion. So in such a case, then these slaves that are owned by a Jew, because it's illegal, so the slaves that are owned by a Jew are permitted to actually light a fire on Shabbos for the Jew, because they are no more than a regular employee hired by the Jew. Although they're owned by the Jew forever and the Jew paid money and they're an eved. But since the king made a decree that that's not permitted, therefore they are allowed to do malacha unlike an eved because they're just a sakir. But there are those that argue with this. The Svira Lane, they hold afata gufan kanu Yisrael, that now as well their body is acquired by the Jew. Okay, but nowadays that you pay for them on the spot, so therefore their body is acquired by the Jew according to everybody, he says, and therefore it would be forbidden to do malacha, to let them do malacha. And likewise, we could be lenient as well. Okay, that goes into a whole different discussion. But he's saying it goes the whole way. Not only are we being strict and saying that the rules of Shabbos apply to them, and therefore they're not permitted to do malacha, even though the king decreed that you're not allowed to own an eved because you're Jewish. Doesn't matter, he says, because since you paid for them right away, therefore that you do own them regardless of the king's decree. He said, but it also works to be lenient. And that is that a Jew that is in the category of a mamzer, an illegitimate child who is a product of a forbidden marriage, a capital offense forbidden marriage. So that child would be allowed to marry a shivcha, or if it's mamzeres, a girl, she'd be allowed to marry an eved. You see, well, I don't want to get too sidetracked, so let's try to keep it brief. A mamzer, a Jewish mamzer, which means that he's the product of father and mother of his that it was a capital offense for them to be together. So, any one of the long list of people that are capital offense, brother and sister had relations. A father and daughter, a mother and son, a Jew and someone else's wife, a married woman. Any of those cases, the product of that is mamzer for the male or mamzeres for the female. A mamzer is 100% Jewish. A mamzeres is 100% Jewish. However, the Torah clearly says that a mamzer is not permitted to enter the Jewish community, which means can't marry a Jew. A mamzer cannot marry a regular Jew, or mamzeres can't marry a regular Jew. They surely cannot marry a non-Jew, they're Jewish. So one of the only people they could marry would be an eved or a shivcha. An eved is not Jewish, but he's not a regular non-Jew. An eved was circumcised, went to mikveh for the sake of becoming an eved, and accepted upon himself all the mitzvahs of avadim. So that person, that eved, is permitted to marry a Jewish mamzeres. So over here, the Mishnah Berurah is bringing down that if a Jew owns an eved or a shivcha, even if it's in a time where the king decreed that it's not allowed for a Jew to own it, but if the Jew does own them, not only do we have to be strict when it comes to Shabbos, that they are not allowed to do any melacha, because they're like an eved and they're not like a regular non-Jew, we get to be lenient, and that eved or shivcha would be allowed to marry a Jewish mamzer or mamzeres. That is what the Mishnah Berurah brings down. But that's not really our discussion. Now, let us see the Biur Halacha. Bir Halacha is on the side of the page, and it's basically the entire column on this page. Starting with right near that little asterisk on the top line where it says Bir Halacha, and it starts off Aleph Yud, which is Eino Yehudi Gamur. Eino Yehudi Gamur, an absolute non-Jew. I think we'll focus next class on this. We'll begin it now. But now that we've done all of this background work, and next class will be a continuation, part 2 of this. So we'll start next class, please God, with this Biur Halacha, and hopefully we won't have to review and repeat. We'll just make reference to this class, but let's start it inside now. Kasav Magen Avraham. Says the Biur Halacha, the Magen Avraham wrote, he's quoting the Magen Avraham that we just saw. Im kibel alav mitzvahs hanoyagos be'eved v'hu sakir. If this individual accepted upon himself the eved mitzvahs, which means he took upon himself to keep all the commandments that a Jewish woman has to keep. But he's only a sakir. He's a hired worker. Nireli, it appears to me, says the Magen Avraham, that his master, the Jewish employer, is not obligated, is not commanded to withhold to him from doing malacha for himself. Peirush, and now the Biur Halacha is in brackets over here, is giving interpretation to the quote that he just said. He's going to explain how he understands these words of the Magen Avraham. Peirush, this means, that if this sakir, who accepted upon himself all the eved mitzvahs, is doing melacha on Shabbos for another Jew, not for his employer, it is surely biblically forbidden. He's no worse than a regular ger toshav, and a ger toshav can't do melacha for any Jew. And now back to the language of the Magen Avraham. And the reason why his master is not commanded to hold him back from doing melacha for himself is because the Torah only prohibits doing melacha if it's an absolute eved that is acquired forever, that he's owned by the Jew forever. But if you'd be a real eved as opposed to this sakir fellow, then he can't do melacha even just for himself. For behold, kibel olav mitzvahs hanoyagos be'isha. He accepted upon himself to do all the Jewish women commandments, and women have to keep Shabbos. Atkan l'shoinoi. Up to here is the language, is the direct quote of the Magen Avraham. End of quote. And now at this point, the Biur Halacha is going to begin his discussion. So we just quoted the Magen Avraham that we saw inside the Magen Avraham, and that was pretty much quoted by the Mishnah Berurah himself. Now we re-quoted it. V'tzarich iyun gadoil. And this, says the Biur Halacha, requires great study. There is pretty much in the rabbinic lexicon, I should say, there are 3 levels or 3 styles of questions, and it's usually written out as an acronym, either Tzadik Ayin, or Tzadik Ayin Kuf, or Tzadik Ayin Gimel. Tzadik Ayin stands for Tzarich Iyun, that this requires study. We need to look into it, meaning it's not clear. Just like the Mishnah, those were the last words of the Magen Avraham. He ended off by saying the Tzarich Iyun. All right. Then Tzadik Ayin Kuf means this requires a little bit of further study. Tzadik Ayin Gimel means this requires a great deal of study. It's a big question. And that's what the Biur Halacha is now introducing. He's saying these words of the Magen Avraham, this statement that he made, we now need to really study and try to understand. What's his big question? What's his problem? Since this sakir, this hired employee, employer, this hired employee is not owned by the Jew, he's not acquired by him forever. Surely there's no such thing as half a conversion. What does it help? Who cares about the fact that this individual accepted upon himself personally to keep all the Eved commandments? So what? Is he an Eved or is he not? He did not go to mikvah and get circumcised. He's a sakir, he's a hired worker, and he accepted upon himself to keep all of the Eved mitzvahs. We have established the Talmud in Tractate B'choros, and it tells you exactly which chapter, on folio 30, page 30 over there, clearly states, Eino Yehudi, a non-Jew, Sheba, that comes, approaches the Jewish court, the Kibulei Olav Din Torah Chutz Midavar Echad Ein Mekabli Noisoi. If he comes to accept upon himself the Torah law, all of Torah, with the exception of one thing, he's ready to accept all 612 commandments. You know there's 613. He accepts upon himself 612. Just one he's excluding. We don't accept him at all. We don't say that you are 99% Jewish. No such thing. And then the Bir Halacha adds, very important in the brackets, Vida, and you should know, Dema de'isa sham, that which the Talmud says there, even if it's one nuance of the rabbis that he's rejecting. Hainu mashadiktu kubabir atayra, ukein de'isa besanhedrin perek ches chamisha teitafois lohisif al divrei soifrim chayav. Chemash Avraham perek yudal milchas rebia she'etik leidlei aflugia asa elavar vishmit milchas ve'tevis. Yeah, all right. He's clarifying that when it says there that if he accepts upon himself everything except for one minuscule, so to say, detail of rabbinic, it means their explanation or interpretation to a biblical law. It's not that if he rejects one rabbinic law that's clearly really rabbinic, that we will then not accept him. It means even if it's a small detail of the way that the rabbis explain the biblical law, but it's got to be clearly biblically based. Anyhow, so who cares about the fact that this sakir, this hired worker, is accepting upon himself all the Eved laws? He's not an Eved. The only one who's not allowed to do malacha is an Eved whose physical body is acquired by the Jew. It's not enough to be a sakir, that's just a hired worker. He has to actually be owned by the Jew. The Yeshal of Shem Eved, and if he has upon him truly the title of Eved, that has to be his status. Not like an Eved, he has to have the halachic status of Eved. Gil Salanu HaTorah, so in such a case the Torah has revealed to us the Beish Kazeh, that in such a man, Dai im yikayim rak mitzvahs haneges ba'isha. It is sufficient for that man to keep all the mitzvahs that apply to Jewish women. And therefore, he then falls into the category of having to keep Shabbos. Mashenkin ba'adam da'alma, but that doesn't apply to a regular person in the world. Ein lanu b'Torah rak oiger toshav o Yisrael gamur. In the Torah, all we have is either a Jew, a full-fledged, regular, 100% Jewish, or a ger toshav. There's no in-between state. There's no guy who wants to be like a ger toshav. He says there's no such thing. Either a Jew is someone who was born from a Jewish mother, or converted kahalacha according to Jewish law, and he's Jewish. If not, then he could be a ger toshav. Now this individual that does not want to accept upon himself the entire Torah, all 613, mistabra, logically it makes sense, and therefore he would be just like a ger toshav. Where does the Magen Avraham get that this person, this sakir who took upon himself to keep Eved mitzvahs, how does he get that he's any better and any more obligated than your ger toshav? To us lishbais b'Shabbos, that this sakir is forbidden, and that the ger toshav is forbidden to work on Shabbos. But this person, you're telling me, is obligated to keep Shabbos. Where does he get that from? I think we're going to leave it here. We'll see next time. We'll review from the beginning of the Bir Halacha. And surely no one should make any rulings or decisions based on today's class because, well, for one, we're still in the middle of the discussion, so we didn't give any final or clear ruling. And until next time, I'd like to wish everyone all the best. Be well, and make sure to adhere to, observe, and keep, and promote and spread the observance of the 7 Noahide laws given by God through Moses to all of mankind. And may all of that hasten the complete revelation of our righteous Moshiach now. Thank you.